Welcome to the Sleep Dives channel. In this session, we're jumping into pages 420 to 453. We're going to explore a really tough challenge that every group, every team faces. How do you take a situation that's full of explosive conflict and turn it into something genuinely productive? We'll see how a boiling cauldron of mistrust at a steel mill was totally transformed through a process called dialogue. And then we'll look at how a related method, skillful discussion, unlocked some absolutely massive results at Intel. Right. So I want you to imagine a room just crackling with tension. You've got decades of bad blood between union leaders and managers at a steel mill, all packed into this 2-day retreat. The air is so thick you could cut it with a knife. And then this quote just erupts from union leader Phil Yancey. It's that moment where everything could have just imploded, but instead it actually became the turning point. Now, that outburst didn't just come from nowhere. Oh no. It was the sound of years and years of frustration finally boiling over. And to really get why it led to a breakthrough, we first have to understand the intense pressure cooker that created it. One manager literally described the feeling in the room as being like a pin in a grenade. You've got 35 people all just waiting to explode. The first couple of hours, totally predictable. Just a barrage of accusations. Is this just another flavor of the month program, the union guys are asking? And management's knee-jerk reaction was to be dismissive, falling right back into those old habits of deflecting and defending. It was the same old destructive dance they'd been doing for decades. But the facilitator, a guy named Bill Isaacs, he had this really fascinating strategy. Instead of trying to calm everyone down and put a lid on it, he introduced this idea of a container. He wanted to create a space of trust that was so strong it could actually hold all the heat of their conflict without shattering. In fact, he kind of actively fanned the flames, believing that the raw energy of all that anger, well, it contained vital information that absolutely needed to get out in the open. And boy, that container was put to the test, like immediately. A manager, tired at the end of a long day, makes a huge mistake. He calls the workers lazy. And that was it. That was the spark. Phil Yancey, in his own words, went ballistic. He's shouting, he's swearing, he's getting in the manager's face. And then dead silence falls over the room. It felt like a total catastrophic failure. But here's the thing, the container didn't break. Incredibly, the next morning, every single person came back. That moment of pure white-hot conflict, which felt like the absolute end, was actually the beginning. For the very first time, they had let the raw, ugly truth be spoken out loud, and they had survived it. Together. The container held, and in doing so, it forged this new, much deeper level of trust. So, that story isn't just about managing anger. Not at all. It actually reveals a really structured process for building that container. And the tool they were using is something called dialogue. Now, this is really, really crucial. Dialogue is not debate. The goal is not to win an argument or to persuade anybody. The goal is simply to explore, to listen, and to build a shared pool of meaning. It's all about divergent thinking, designed to uncover what the group collectively understands long before you even try to force some kind of agreement. And a key tool for doing this is the ladder of inference. It helps you see just how quickly we all leap from raw data to big conclusions and actions, usually without even checking our assumptions on the way up. At the retreat, they started using it as a kind of shared language. So instead of shouting, "You're wrong," they could say, "Hey, it sounds like you're pretty high up that ladder. Can you walk me back down through your data?" You can see the power of this in another company, where a 2-hour dialogue started over a single word. A German executive wanted to change the word international to global. To the Americans, it was like, what's the difference? But as they talked, they uncovered this deep-seated mental model. International meant a US-centric company with some foreign outposts. Global meant a true partnership, with a company's mission at the center. That one word revealed a fundamental flaw in their entire business strategy. Amazing, right? Okay, so dialogue is incredibly powerful for generating these deep insights. But eventually, you have to make a decision. You have to get things done. And that requires a shift from just exploring to actually taking action. And that's where a different tool comes in. The key difference here is all about intention. Dialogue is divergent. You're trying to open things up and discover. Skillful discussion is convergent. You're trying to narrow things down to a decision or an action plan. You can think of it as the practical bridge that takes all that shared understanding you built in dialogue and focuses it on getting a specific outcome. For a perfect example of skillful discussion in action, let's take a trip to an Intel assembly and testing plant in Arizona. So the plant manager, Ed Carpenter, he knew his senior staff weren't really a team. I mean, they were all experts in their own little departmental silos, but they weren't a team. As he put it, they just didn't really care about each other's success. They were constantly making decisions that were great for their own department, but actually hurt the performance of the plant as a whole. So the team starts practicing skillful discussion. And this creates just enough safety to finally bring an undiscussable issue out into the open. There was this one manufacturing group, we'll just call them Group A, and they had a reputation for being really resistant to change. During one session, another manager finally just admitted the truth. He said, "We're afraid to even ask you for things because we just assume you'll say no." And then came the absolute stunner. The leader of Group A just looks at him and says that they had already made the exact change everyone was asking for. They'd done it weeks earlier for their own reasons and just hadn't told anybody. The other teams had been simmering with resentment, assuming Group A was being difficult when the solution was already in place the whole time. It was a complete and total breakdown of communication. Once they started fixing these communication gaps, well, the results were just incredible. Factory throughput time, that's the total time it takes to get a product through the plant, was reduced by more than 40%, a massive number. So that's a huge improvement in speed, but the impact on quality was just as big. The number of product losses was cut in half. And get this, these weren't gains from some new fancy machine or new process. No, they were the direct result of simply improving the quality of the team's conversations. So what can we all learn from this? Well, both the steel mill and the Intel stories show the exact same thing. Better conversations lead to better results, period. And the practice of skillful discussion is built on 5 simple but really powerful protocols that can be your toolkit. These are the essential ground rules. First, pay attention to your intentions. Know what you actually want from the conversation. Second, balance advocacy with inquiry. Spend as much time trying to understand other people as you do making your own point. Third, build shared meaning. Don't just assume that words like success mean the same thing to everyone. Fourth, use your self-awareness as a resource. Your own feelings, they're data. And fifth, explore impasses. When you get stuck, get curious about why. And to make these really practical, here are some questions you can ask. For intentions, ask yourself, am I actually willing to be influenced here? For advocacy and inquiry, ask other people, what leads you to that view? To build meaning, ask the group, okay, when we say done, what does that actually look like? To use self-awareness, just notice when you feel yourself getting frustrated and ask what that's telling you. And to explore those moments when you're stuck, try to figure out, are we disagreeing about facts, methods, goals, or something deeper, like our values? And that really brings us to the core takeaway of all of this. The most powerful lever you have for improving performance in your work, on your teams, in your whole life. It isn't some new strategy or a fancy piece of technology. It's the quality of your conversations. So, I'll leave you with this to reflect on. Every team has its own version of Group A, right? That difficult, undiscussable topic that everyone just tiptoes around. So, what is the undiscussable issue in your team? And what kind of breakthrough might be waiting just on the other side if you could finally talk about it skillfully?